How can I get alerted when somebody changes a critical server? We'll see how Tanium and ServiceNow have solved that challenge. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone. Remember that classic Indiana Jones scene with the golden artifact? He tried to swap it out with a bag of sand. Remember that? But it was an unauthorized change. And what happened? Right? That boulder classic chase scene rolling after good old Indiana Jones. That same boulder chase scene you can see reenacted at Disney theme parks around the world, right? Well, now think about the critical treasures in your own critical server environment. Wouldn't it be nice if you could get alerted when someone changes something outside a change window? And what if the person making that change was a threat actor? Yeah, okay. Well, let's think about that as we go through here today. So help me welcome Saqib back to the show to demo what Tanium and ServiceNow can do for you in this situation. So welcome back, Saqib. Please introduce yourself for those who haven't met you yet.
Thanks, Ashley. My name is Saqib Khan. I'm the field CIO here at Tanium, responsible for our ServiceNow partnership. And yeah, today is a very exciting discussion. I think this is some of the widely asked use cases that we have for our highly regulated customers. So I'm very excited to actually share this integration with everybody on the call.
So you mentioned regulated customers specifically. What's the problem we're solving?
Well, the problem we're solving, Ashley, is that this is a requirement for most public companies and any large customer or company out there that has audit and compliance requirements, looking at SOX, ISO, FISMA, HIPAA for healthcare. This is the problem we're solving, is to be able to tell you that there has been a change in your environment that was not authorized and that we found it. And typically that's done through manual processes or very noisy tools that really don't get you anywhere to solving the problem. So Tanium is really correlating and ensuring that not only you know what's going on, but also you know what to do next as an automation and process, filter down all that noise and get things done to resolve and mitigate risk.
Once again, Tanium working together with ServiceNow to solve real-world business challenges that often are tangled up in a lot of manual, inefficient processes. That's what we do best. Is I've heard it said that ServiceNow's the brain and Tanium's the eyes and the hands, seeing and making changes to the environment and reporting it back to the brain, right? So on this show, we're actually, after 3.5 years of doing this show, we have never talked about the Tanium Integrity Monitor module. And that's where this really hinges on the Tanium side. Could you tell us briefly, what is Tanium Integrity Monitor?
Actually, it was developed actually for this use case, right? So Integrity Monitor serves a key purpose and solution end-to-end for file integrity monitoring. And for those of you who are from the security space and risk space, you'll understand that file integrity monitoring is a requirement in your organization as part of your security program. And so Integrity Monitor is the actual detection mechanism to understand and find events that are going on related to changes against computers and operating systems. So that's basically what it does. It records changes in the environment and lets you report on that based on your requirements, which again could be FISMA, HIPAA, other regulatory compliance, or it could be Windows, Linux, etc.
Yeah, and kind of in the nutshell, I mean, you think about threat response, which is kind of our alerting platform for finding indicators of compromise. What this Integrity Monitor module does is it'll look for Windows registry changes or file system changes on Windows or other operating systems as well. And so you define a computer group of machines to monitor, and then specific file paths or registry paths that you want to monitor. And then you can set up a notification when something changes outside of what you expect to see there. And so now we can take that notification, send it through ServiceNow. Very similar. If you've watched Saqib's other episodes or the ones with Brandon's, this is just another integration with ServiceNow. You've kind of got the rhythm of how those integrations work. And so that's what we're going to explore today. What are the prerequisites on the ServiceNow side as far as other integrations before we can tackle this one?
Prerequisites on the ServiceNow side are actually very straightforward for this because the initial phase of this integration is most customers would want to alert the right group and be able to create a more filtered down incident or some sort of notification in ServiceNow by Tanium reducing the noise and telling you what's actually malicious or what's happening in the environment daily. All you need is ServiceNow incident management, or the good news about this integration is you can actually configure it to create any record in any table in ServiceNow that you think would be the right place for the alert itself, for the incident or whatever else. So you don't have to use incident management. If you have investments in your SecOps suite in ServiceNow, you can use security incident management and create a security incident instead. Requirements wise, at the minimum, you need ITSM at the, based on your process and what your licensing already you have in SecOps, you can also tie into security incident response as well.
And does the ITSM automatically grandfather in like the ITAM, the ITAM asset management as well?
We do recommend that as a prerequisite to make sure your matching of these events relate with one-to-one matches with configuration items as part of the CMDB ITAM integration that we have. It's not required. If you have it, great. If you don't have it, get it if you can. And if you can't get it and are looking into it in the future, that's okay. What we need is a CMDB that we can rely on and ensure that we match against your serial numbers and names of those computers.
Right. So if you're populating your ServiceNow CMDB with data from another source and your Tanium machines are not there when you're getting the alert, there's no CI to match it to. So why not go ahead and just set up the ITAM integration? That just makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And again, we've got other videos on that. It's really easy to do. So walk us through here, Saqib. How do we set this up?
So let's talk about the back end first, which is Tanium. As you know, Tanium Integrity Monitor is a solution that will detect events. The events look very similar to this. These are the actual events here on my screen. You'll see there are some events for deletions, creation, renaming, write events, etc. And these type of changes that are happening against some sort of file path, process path, registry path, or folder path. And again, as you mentioned, Ashley, Windows and Linux are supported in this offering. And when we look at events that are created, they're typically created against what we call watch lists. Inside of Tanium's Integrity Monitor solution, you have the ability to say, hey, I have a watch list that I'm going to create for HIPAA, or I'm going to have a watch list for regulatory compliance around NERC or FISMA. And so when I'm looking at FISMA, contractor data, et cetera, these are federal requirements. I'm looking for very specific locations where I don't want changes to happen. I don't want these changes to ever occur without a proper change request. And we understand that there may be also inclusions and exclusions that you might want to add to your file paths. And so Tanium allows you to do that very easily by defining your watch list with the file path registry paths, and then defining your exclusions and inclusions. That's the first step, is to ensure you understand what you want to watch and what you want to report against as events.
You and I are talking about this working for a software company, but our customers watching this, they're very familiar with the regulatory compliance in their own industry. And you've got all those documents out there that'll tell you specifically what you need to monitor.
At the very high level, you will get a Linux watch list and a AIX watch list and a Windows watch list, and those are just out of the box. Solaris watch list as well. So watch list for Windows could be anything. Out of the box, you get some examples. And so what that means is, you have a watch list. Now you've defined your requirements essentially on what you want to watch. Then what you do is actually use these watch lists to monitor them in what we call Windows monitors, Linux. These are like the computer groups essentially. These are the things that fit a certain dynamic group of computers. for those watch lists. So Windows could have an operating system of Windows, and there are 5 endpoints with 4 rules and 1 computer group that match this monitor. If I click that, it will bring over those specific computer groups and endpoints that match the computer group requirements for Windows. So without going too far into it, these are all the predefined things that come with Tanium, and then you'd modify them as you needed when there's too much noise.
If you're watching this and you think, I've never heard of this Tanium module, it's actually one of our older modules, really. It's been around for years, but it's kind of a sleeper because unless you need this specific capability, most folks wouldn't know to ask for it. But particularly in regulated environments, this one's really big, very popular with a lot of customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do here is that now that we have all the data that we need based on our requirements, the first step is really to understand how we're going to package this data so then ServiceNow can understand how to process it. We do have a certified solution on the ServiceNow Store called the File Integrity Monitoring Unauthorized Change integration with ServiceNow on the ServiceNow Store under Tanium, and you'll see that. One of the things during the deployment of that solution will require you to configure what we call a question inside of Tanium. And this question is exactly what you are typically used to in Interact, where you have a amazing question, and now you want to essentially save it to run it on schedule, or filter out some data that you don't want being exported to ServiceNow. So we've done that for you. We've given you a good criteria of how to get the best out of that events report, and filter out all the noise and also the errors or any other things that you don't need in there. And so it's a very prescriptive question. And once you've set it up, you're going to get a very, very focused report on the things that ServiceNow cares about. So,
And I'm gonna guess that that question is detailed in the walkthrough guide out on help.tanium.com.
absolutely. Every single line of this question, if you look at inside question builder, computer name, getting integrity monitor events, and the parameters for that. This is the sensor that gets all those events. Then getting the serial number, and then filtering with specific matches, but then also filtering out a lot of the data that we don't necessarily need, like errors and etc. And that will happen in your environment where you may get some endpoints that are offline, or they don't have integrity monitor tooling installed, and there may be some errors that return as event time. So you don't want to send that out. So that it's really important to configure the question, take your time to do it, and follow the instructions. But that's one of the first requirements, is getting the question configured.
Yeah, classic Tanium save question. For those who are new to Tanium, a save question just means it's a question that we ask on a routine schedule, and it just goes out, retrieves that data, it caches it for you, so it's always there and waiting, especially when you have machines that are follow the sun, maybe online and offline different times a day. Hopefully that's not the case for your servers, though.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add is that you need to make sure that as you create a question, before you create the question, ask the generic question first. Ask Tanium about integrity monitor events that are in the environment. So this question is just the out of the box question with no filters. You'll see that first time you ask it, you're gonna get things that say integrity monitor not installed, NA, etc. That gives you a list of things that are not actual times, right? So we would expect a time stamp here. So it gives me 3 things that I want to filter out from my save question. So now I take this question and I copy it to filter, let's say, for example, this is the one I want to filter out. And I go to copy my copy, and then you follow those instructions to basically say, okay, with this, I also want to have computer name, and also want to have computer serial number. And then, as we go into specific things around filtering, you could do things like exclusions of the event time, for example, right? So if I said, okay, well, monitor events, event time does not contain NA on Tanium client container.
Yeah, it might just be easier to put one regex in there that has something that starts with a date timestamp format, and there you go. That just one rule would take care of them all off. Yeah.
Yep, exactly that. Yeah, most customers do that actually, and there's a lot of scenarios where some people might not know regex, so maybe the question builder might be an easy experience for you. So now that I have the question, Ashley, the next step is very simple and straightforward. As part of the integration, there's so I'm going to switch to the ServiceNow side for just a second. As part of the configuration on our connector in ServiceNow, as you go through a guided setup, which is, again, as like any other integrations, we want to make it easy for you to walk step by step through simple configuration requirements. This will include things like the ability to provide authentication, some basic configuration steps. First step is that you have your ServiceNow requirements here. We would set up the authentication. We would set up the all the requirements around host and URL. And there's a bunch of things here that are going to be things that you read through. Some of them are preset for you as a default, so you don't really have to worry about them, like the wiggle room, etc. I'm not going to go through all of them, but most of them you won't really need to do much. But do go through them in detail to make sure if it applies to you, you enable it or disable it. And there are some things in ServiceNow that you have to add in because we're using task and non-task tables in ServiceNow for ServiceNow admins. We do need cross-scope privileges configured, which is very straightforward. And the one thing I love about Tim Woodruff and the way he develops a lot of these integrations is that there's a lot of good examples in the instructions. For example, all you need to do is, these are things that you should read, and it will help you, even if you're a new admin to ServiceNow, be able to go through this very quickly and understand exactly what you need to do versus trying to figure it out or Google searching how to do this, right? All of this is very well documented and been provided. Now, when we pivot from ServiceNow requirements and then there's one more step in ServiceNow where you create a service account, and the service account will require a very specific role that we've added into the integration. It will also require ITIL, so you can see incident problem change tables, because those are going to be required to then configure what we're going to talk about next, which is the behavior of the integration when data actually makes it in. Username, password, and the ability to look at those tables is the minimum requirement for that. The next step is to configure what we just configured, right? Which was the integrity monitor saved question. So that's what this is talking about, and it has instructions and documentations on how to do that properly. And then what we're going to walk through now is a Tanium Connect, which is actually going to be the part where we take that saved question and send it out to ServiceNow to process. But before we do that, coming back to this, configure integrity monitor, you need to be very careful here. Even though you have a saved question, which is great, you still need to identify the Tanium watch lists inside of ServiceNow. Otherwise, we are going to end up sending everything, and it's not going to be meaningful for you to send everything. It's meaningful for you to send things that actually matter to you. So, the watch list that we talked about in Tanium, where you have HIPAA, FISMA, Windows, Linux, those are the type of events that you folks care about. You have to create a record inside of ServiceNow under the watch list page in our integration to essentially mimic that exact name. So exactly the name and what type of watch list is it? Is it an operating system or is it application watch list? Now, application watch lists are slightly different because what they do is they take the operating system and the server or computer that these changes are coming from and relate up to if it relates to a specific application. So without going too far into why that's important, I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. The main focus of this page is to let you decide what happens when, let's say, for example, in this screen, when a Windows event comes in against Windows servers or computers into ServiceNow. This behavior section is what you need to configure and decide if it's going to be an incident that we create when a new event or unauthorized event is created, or is it going to be a security incident, or is it going to be something else? You can pick and choose whatever table you like and fill in the required fields for those records that will be created. One really important part of this is that everything you do in a watch list configuration here is based on a alert that gets generated for a day. We don't create hundreds of alerts for hundreds of events. We would create one alert that encompasses events within a 24-hour period. And you can change that interval to whatever else you want, but we will encompass all of those events into a single alert. Out of those alerts, or that one alert for the day, or those events during the alert in the daytime or whatever, those events, some of them might have authorized changes for them. Some of them might not have authorized changes. So the ones that don't have authorized changes, this is the behavior that it will execute for those. And it will
So to
create.
recap for a second, we've already gone into the store and selected the unauthorized change management application or integration. So we've added that to our subscription. And then Tanium is sending all the changes into ServiceNow. ServiceNow knows where we've got change controls defined. So these servers in ServiceNow have change controls during these windows. Here's the change data coming in from Tanium. Hey, we saw this thing on this server change. And then the logic here, the brain of ServiceNow is saying, were those changes within change windows or outside of change windows? And if they're outside, then somebody needs to know about it.
Correct. Yeah. And if you want to ignore the dependency on open changes during the window and just create alerts, incidents, or whatever any behavior you set up here, you can select this and it will do that for you, because sometimes customers have requirements around making sure you log everything and not necessarily, work on everything. So I don't recommend that, but if you have requirements, you can do that, and the behavior will still execute if there is a change associated with that time frame. Actually, now that was a mouthful of configuration, but the takeaway is that you do need a watch list configured inside of ServiceNow. The watch list has to consist of the same name and ID that is in Tanium. In Tanium, the watch list is inside of the Integrity Monitor solution. So if I look at this AIX watch list, there is an ID, number 3, and there is a name. That's the first step in ServiceNow. Then you want to make sure you have one-to-one mapping to this. And then you define the behavior of that watch list. That's a very important part of the configuration. Most customers get that, miss that completely. And they ask, well, why am I not seeing alerts and event data? That's why there's no one-to-one match yet. As events come in, what will happen? Events will get created as records in the event data table inside of the event data link here. And we will look up any changes that are open in that time window, the event time window, against that CI, against that computer that we're mapping against. So again, this is why the CMDB integration is important, because when we bring in data, it's against a serial number and a computer name. So it's heavy dependency on serial number. So we want to make sure your serial numbers are correct in your CMDB. You can only do that if you have a source of truth for your CMDB that ensures that serial numbers match, right? So just get the CMDB integration in. It only takes about 20, 15 minutes to do that entire thing end to end. Going back to the point I was making is that once it's matched, it's going to look up changes in that time frame and then put all this together as a record. For every record, you're going to have all the relevant information you need to be able to understand if there's an authorized change or an unauthorized change inside of that time frame. And we'll do that by matching, first of all, change time windows with the event time. And then customers can also, if they want in the future or after the fact, create their own checks inside the change. Maybe you want to check a manifest file, or you want to do something on top of that. You're open to creating those processes on your own based on your requirements.
So this is a great way to audit to make sure changes are actually being executed and that they're being executed by the people that are supposed to do them and people aren't making changes outside those windows. Yeah.
Yeah, and we also classify changes. So we'll tell you if it's registry, create, delete, rename, write, unknown. So now you can report on this. Analytics, you can see a trending line of, like, say, unauthorized changes or overall changes being made on servers that shouldn't really have a lot of changes. Why are we making that many changes? So all of those things are important data points to make very, very important decisions around reducing risk, giving out access, removing access, etc., and then really hardening your system so you don't have that type of risk exposed anymore. Now, the event layer is what I showed you right now. This is the data coming in, individual records for every event. What happens is, remember I said there's a mechanism for alerting. So alerts are for grouping all the events from a 24-hour period into a single alert. I open up one of the alerts here for my Windows watch list, you'll see that there's no events here, but an alert was created. That's fine. There may not have been any alerts for that day. So what we do is we can just delete this alert or close it or archive it. There may be things that have relevant event data, things that are in the alert. And as you can see, these alert time, start and end times are related to a 24-hour period, but you can change it to whatever you want. And if there were any events here, you would see all of the related changes. And then if there's things that don't have changes and they're still in the event list here for that day, then they're all going to be grouped in one single alert. We don't want to create hundreds of thousands of alerts for you to manage or go through. As alerts are coming in and we're noticing that you have changes happening in the environment that don't have an open change request, an incident will be created. And this incident will follow the behavior you set up in that watch list. So all of this is like all of these things previously to Tanium were manual for customers and process teams and security teams and ops teams. This is connecting security teams with the security of operational teams to reduce the manual steps you typically take to alerting someone or looking at why this is an unauthorized change, when it happened, etc. We'll do that for you.
So what are you seeing with customers that you're helping when they set this up as far as like that collection interval? You said 24 hours. As a security person, that seems like a pretty wide range for an alert window. Are people configuring them on smaller ranges, or is that regulatory specified?
Let's be clear that alerts don't necessarily mean it's alerting you. Alerts is just a kind of like a batch of events for a given time frame. So what really alerts you is the watch list behavior. If there is an unauthorized change during alert alert timing, if there's an unauthorized change during the alert timing, you won't need to worry about alerting someone. It will automatically follow the behavior and create an incident or whatever that you've set up for you in that time frame. So alert is just a group of events that are stored in a single view for the day. So you don't have to go through hundreds of thousands of events in a single table to figure out what your patterns are, what happened yesterday, today. It's all going to be correlated into a single alert window for you for 24 hours.
Are there any troubleshooting steps that are popular, like things that often get missed? What's your most top, things that the easy low hanging fruit on fixing when it's for some reason it's not working?
So the most common thing is to, like I said earlier, is the watch list name and ID. Make sure you set up the watch list records in ServiceNow manually, exact name, exact ID. That's the most common thing that we just, people just don't get events until that happens. I would recommend go through the watch list guided tour. We walk you through how to do this end to end, step by step. It will tell you what to click and how to do it. And it will walk you through how to create a watch list. So that's the most common troubleshooting step. The other step is that when you configure Integrity Monitor for events, make sure that you're focused on not everything and anything. Focus on things that are related to your regulatory compliance and requirements. So your watch list should be really created against operating systems that you're going to be audited against. When someone auditor comes in and asks you, hey, or your team has a requirement around Windows domain controller changes or whatever, make sure you create your watch list with the right inclusions and exclusions. In terms of troubleshooting, what you will see in the environment is that some of your endpoints may not have, like we saw in that question that we asked, may not have Integrity Monitor deployed. So as any other, a Tanium product, make sure your tooling is up to date on those endpoints. Like this is a very common thing where it says Integrity Client Monitor extension not installed. This will come up. And that means you're missing that event data from those endpoints that could cause you to fail an audit. So figure out which endpoints currently have 1,000 apparently that don't have this installed, right? So this is a big risk to my organization. Make sure.
Well, that's normal too, right? So my everyday desktop users may not be required to have this.
Right.
So I would expect that you'd only have the tooling deployed to your critical monitoring regulatory environments. I mean, think about like a isolated PCI environment, for example, right? Just those assets would have the tooling installed most likely. So I would expect to see the report showing some machines that don't have it installed as just kind of normal for most
Absolutely. Yeah,
environments.
servers and your regulatory requirement environments, those are the top ones. But do an audit here. Make sure that, this count has the right
Yeah.
endpoint that are deployed. So those are the two common things. And then lastly, what you're going to end up seeing in ServiceNow is, of course, in any integration, if you see that you're doing everything right, and we didn't really walk through the connect job much actually, but I'll walk through that because this is really important, right? On the ServiceNow side, everything will make sense and it will work really, really easy. You won't have a lot of issues. But when you look at sending a connect job, like how you folks are used to, some of the things that you want to be mindful of is the source. In the source, when you use your save question as a source, you want to make sure you hide errors and hide no results and flatten your results. These three settings are crucial for the other side, which is going to process this, right? So if you don't do this, you're going to have errors show up in the export and errors likely show up in ServiceNow as well. Aside from that, the columns that you select are all documented, so make sure they're selected correctly. And then depending on how large your environment is, you're going to have to play around with the batch size. Most environments can live with 1,000 in a query to integrity monitor or the save question. Sometimes you could do 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. The batch size is going to be dependent on your environment itself of Tanium. And also the batch size on the ServiceNow side is also dependent on your ServiceNow environment. How much could you process at one given time? So those things are more advanced settings that you don't necessarily need to worry about in the initial run. But after a week, go back and review how fast things are going, how long things are taking in ServiceNow, and adjust these accordingly to go faster or slower, or if you're having problems, then definitely change them too, so you can understand what the right setting would be for you. As a destination setting, it's got to be a JSON format and it's got to be a generated document for JSON to give you the complete payload. Most people forget to check generate document and then the integration doesn't work. So make sure that generate document is selected and it is the format in a JSON. Those are the only 2 or 3 things that I would point out for the connect job.
And again, all these steps are identified if you go to help.tanium.com and search for Integrity Monitor Service Now, or just go to the Integrations and API button there on the right side of that help.tanium.com, and then go to ServiceNow, and you'll see the Tanium Integrity Monitor integration. All the steps are there. So, Saqib, I'm curious to know what you're hearing from customers who have implemented this in their own environments.
The best news I heard from a very large customer, a global customer that has 2 or 3 different entities across the globe using this today, is that one, the outcome of using this was that they were able to pass their audit, and their audit is something that they have regularly with the bank that the one of the banks that's our customer, and so the fact that they passed it within a very short amount of time shows that this thing works. The auditors are happy with it, and the other thing I heard was that it is a fairly open integration. You define your behavior, you define your workflows and process. So it's an opportunity for your ServiceNow admins and ServiceNow architects to really think through what good looks like for the process, and then use the behavior section to do a step-by-step workflow orchestration through ServiceNow. Then you tie into your SOC process, you tie into major incident management, you tie into your playbook for a potential breach that's about to happen. It makes it easy to plug and play with this integration.
Very nice. Yeah, I mean, if, if you've got a mission critical app server and the installation for the application disappears, that's gonna cause some problems. And it's nice to be able to get alerted on that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this tour and all the other work that you've done. You and Brandon are real heroes, and Paul, the whole team here, and Tim. So many people helping others get the most out of Tanium and ServiceNow. As we wrap up, anything else you want to leave with our audience?
I'm just very blessed to have people like Tim Woodruff and Brandon and Paul and everybody, helping out with this. And big shout out to Tim Woodruff for creating this integration in limited time that he had, and really creating a world-class experience for our customers. And I appreciate your time too, Ashley. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Saqib. So now I'll close with another movie reference, right? A classic scene, Indiana Jones. Let's think about Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise suspended from the line. He's descending into this place he's not supposed to be, right? There's lasers everywhere. If he touches something, he's left a fingerprint now, or a drop of sweat, right? We've seen something happen in the environment that wasn't supposed to happen, and somebody needs to get alerted. So now you can do that with your critical infrastructure, pass those audits for those in very stringent industry regulations, using this together with Tanium and ServiceNow. As always, there are helpful links in the show notes below. Please check those out. And that wraps up this episode of Tanium Tech Talks. And until next time, go Tanium.